war. Here, the area is shaded at the top, where the entire civilian population has been ordered to move to the south. Tens of thousands of people are making that journey through a war zone and under the threat of Israeli bombs. Northern Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas of the Gaza Strip. It's home to 200,000 Palestinian refugees who are displaced yet again. But with so many displaced Palestinians fleeing to southern Gaza, the conditions there are dire. Khan Yunis in southern Gaza is one of the places where people in the north have been told to head to. But Israeli airstrikes have been pounding residential buildings there too. At least one Palestinian has been killed and several have been injured in an attack only hours ago. Aljazeera's Yumna Al-Sayed also had to escape from Gaza to Khan Yunis with her family. Here's what she filmed inside a car as she drove through flattened neighbourhoods. Dozens of families are on the move, some on foot and some in a cramped car. We managed to speak to her about the harrowing conditions that Palestinians are facing in areas such as Khan Yunis. I began by asking what Palestinians leaving northern Gaza like her were able to bring.
We took very little stuff, Rob. We took whatever we could.
Yumna, are you okay?
I'm okay, but the situation is extremely terrible. We have no electricity, we have no water, we have no internet. I could gather whatever I could gather in just a few hours for my children. And all the families the same. It's not just me. This is how all the families are. And we just took little food and drink with us. And there's a shortage, an acute shortage of food in the shops, in supermarkets everywhere. We literally can barely find water and food and everything. We're just shut out of the whole world.
Yumna, I understand, of course, we all do, that this is very difficult for you, your family, and of course all those trying to move towards Khan Yunis. Given the fact that the people in Khan Yunis are already under a lot of stress and already in a very difficult situation, how are the people of Khan Yunis coping with the influx of people from the north? How are they trying to help people who are arriving in their town?
Rob, I swear to God, literally every house in Khan Yunis is hosting 2 or 3 families from Gaza City that they don't even know. People who have relatives here in Khan Yunis have gone to their relatives in addition to neighbors from their buildings in Gaza City, and they're hosting them in their homes. Every single home. Like, I'm staying in a 100 meters apartment with 3 other families. This is basically how it is. And everyone, all the homes around me are like that. People, yes, they've opened their homes to welcome everyone, whoever they can take. Other homes have, like, we're talking about over 20, 30 people in one apartment. This is how it is. But people are just saying at least they would find a shelter, a roof on their top to take shelter in from the bombardments and to stay in, since they're forced to evacuate. And yet we're still getting calls from so many people we know asking us if there's space around us, if we know anyone that they still have space to host them with them.
Well, it's been reported that an agreement's been reached to allow foreigners to exit Gaza through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Now, for more on that, Safwat Al-Khalout's joining us on the line from Gaza. What more do we know about this agreement, Safwat?
Yes, according to the foreigners in Gaza, they told us that they received information last night that their embassies and their foreign ministries they reached an agreement or arrangement with the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Based on this agreement, the foreigners, including the Palestinians who carry foreign citizenship or foreign nationalities, they can leave the Gaza Strip today from 9 GMT until 1:13 GMT. So they have like 4 hours to leave according to this arrangement. And according to this arrangement, the Israelis provided the families, these families with special like map and special coordinates, and that they have to follow to reach safely the Rafah crossing. Otherwise, they can get hurt on the way because the Israelis are still bombarding everywhere. So today, when they reached Rafah crossing at the 9G, they were informed by their embassies that the arrangement has been delayed. First, they said it was cancelled, but then they said They were informed that the arrangement has been delayed until tomorrow. They said that some other regional countries are involved in this arrangement, including Egypt, including Qatar, together with the United States of America and with other European countries, of course.
Safwat, I understand that you and your family have moved south to Khan Yunis, like Yumna al-Sayed and so many others from the north of Gaza. The shelling is continuing in Gaza. What can you tell us about that?
Well, as Yumna said, we started the journey for searching for some water from the morning. It's really special and complicated issue, and not like previous times. This time we are all looking for some water. We are looking for some food for our families, for our kids. Everybody, myself, in my new place, some people, they knock my doors, they ask for some water if I have special or I manage to find some. This is in terms of home or family stuff. And when I, in my journey looking for the water, I found lots of destroyed homes and neighborhoods. The last one was like 2 hours ago when the Israelis bombarded a house in Deir al-Balah city, where I am staying. It's halfway between Gaza City and Khan Yunis, by the way. It's a small town. So in this bombarded house, we could see the smoke still, the positive smoke coming up from this destroyed building. The ambulances and the rescue teams are still trying to pick up the bodies and the injuries, because they still believe that there are some people alive under the rubble. They picked up 3 bodies and still seven others injured, and they were carried to the hospital. The hospitals are still complaining, are still urging the international community for urgent humanitarian corridors to enable or to help the health system to cope with such enormous number of injuries arriving every second to Gaza Strip Hospital.
Safwat, thank you very much indeed. Safwat Al-Khaloud talking to us from close to Khan Yunis. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's in Saudi Arabia, meeting Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud to discuss the situation in Gaza. This is part of his extended tour to the region in the hopes of preventing the conflict between Israel and Hamas from spiraling into a bigger war.
As Israel pursues its legitimate right to defending its people and to trying to assure that this never happens again, it is vitally important that all of us look out for civilians. And we're working together to do exactly that. In particular, working on establishing safe areas in Gaza, working on establishing corridors so that humanitarian assistance can reach people who need it. None of us want to see suffering by civilians on any side, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's anywhere else.
We need to find a way to quickly de-escalate the situation, to quickly bring back peace, at least stopping the guns, and then working towards addressing also the humanitarian challenges. And here I have to emphasize that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is very, very difficult, and we need to work together to make sure that access for humanitarian relief and humanitarian goods is allowed. This is something that is critical and is, of course, enshrined in international humanitarian law.
Well, our diplomatic editor, James Bays, explains what Antony Blinken's trying to achieve on this trip to the region.
He's going to be dealing with Saudi Arabia as a country which had been getting closer to Israel. Remember, there was talk of a normalization deal just weeks ago. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu at the UN General Assembly seemed to think it had already happened. He said we're on the cusp of a dramatic breakthrough. Clearly, that is on hold right now. But he's hoping that with the US's close ties with Saudi Arabia, with Saudi Arabia's increasing understanding of Israel, that they can help them with the regional dynamic. Because I think what they're really worried about is escalation, spillover. What we've seen happening in Israel and Gaza moving to other countries in the region, Syria getting involved, Iran getting involved, Lebanon getting involved, and Saudi is a very important regional player. So I think that's number one on the list. From the Saudi side, you heard them say it there, they want to see a reduction in the violence and in the casualties. Not a call for an immediate ceasefire, which we have had from some others in the Arab world, and it's worth reminding you that Secretary Blinken, for his side, he's not calling for any sort of ceasefire or cessation of hostilities. In fact, I think he's preparing these Arab leaders for the next phase of the war. He's been speaking very closely to the Israelis. He probably knows the battle plans. He probably knows that there's likely to be a ground invasion. He may even know when it's going to take place. He's preparing them for the fact that this is going to get much more serious soon.
Well, Hamas has fired more rockets from Gaza into southern Israel. This was the scene in the city of Ashkelon after rockets struck some areas. There are no reports of casualties. We're going to bring in Stephanie Decker, who's in Sderot in southern Israel, close to the border with Gaza. Now, you were reporting to us from Ashkelon earlier, just a few hours ago, showing us some of the damage there. You've obviously moved to another area which has been targeted. What's happening there?
Yeah, there are rockets pretty much being fired in barrages throughout the day. We were in Ashkelon, at least 3 large barrages. You were talking there about the Iron Dome interceptions. It does have a high success rate in general. We're now in Sderot. This is much closer to the Gaza border, around 4 kilometers. This is where one of the heaviest battles took place on Saturday. You can see impact here, and also to give you an extent of the heaviness of the firefight, you can see bullet holes all across this wall. Sderot, an area where Hamas fighters blockaded themselves into the police station, the Israeli police station here, and a gun battle ensued for around 24 hours. A lot of civilians were killed here. So this is the situation. It is a very active and fluid front line. The streets are deserted. It is Shabbat, which is the Jewish day of rest, if you will. Everybody is indoors, and of course the fact that you do have sirens all the time sounding here. People are staying indoors. Just now we had an interception as well. There was no siren. It is so close to the Gaza border that it's about 15 seconds. But of course, people here do have shelters to run to, and they do have the Iron Dome system. Basically, just to give you an indication as well, we've had reports of an infiltration attempt also along the Gaza border. The Israeli army saying that they killed 2 Palestinians. So it gives you a sense that the border still doesn't seem to be completely secure when it comes to these infiltrations.
Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. That's Stephanie Decker talking to us from Sderot in southern Israel. And still ahead on Aljazeera, these are live pictures of the skyline of Gaza, where you can see some of the smoke rising from those Israeli bombardments that we've seen over the last few hours. We're going to have more of our continuing coverage of the war in Gaza. Stay with us on Aljazeera.
So many politicians want to be the Republican Party's candidate, but do any stand a chance against Donald Trump? If our planet is burning and we're running out of time, why aren't we doing more to deal with climate change? Are American politics just getting too polarized and too extreme for most Americans?
A quizzical look at US politics, the bottom line.
Pumping out the last drops to save Iraq's crucial rivers. The small amount of water from the reservoir in Anbar province is going into the Euphrates. The river's level has been declining drastically, largely because of dams in neighboring Turkey. Iraq has also experienced years of drought and unprecedented water shortages. But experts worry this water with high levels of salt could pose a threat to humans and the environment.
In fact, it is dangerous not only for humans, but also for animals and plants as well.
Now, its levels have significantly declined to only about 6 billion cubic meters.
The reservoir managers are hopeful the coming rainy season will fill up their reserves and replace what they lost. But for the years to come, the lack of water here in the cradle of civilization could mean the end of communities that have lived by the rivers for thousands of years.
You're watching Al Jazeera. Let me bring you the latest on the war in Gaza. Israel has ordered more than 1 million Palestinians in northern Gaza to evacuate to the south. At least 70 Palestinians, mostly Israeli airstrikes, have killed more than 2,200 Palestinians since last Saturday, including 614 children. More than 324 Palestinians were killed in the past 24 hours. Israel has asked hospitals in northern Gaza treating hundreds of injured people to evacuate within hours. Well, there have been pro-Palestinian solidarity protests across the world. Rallies are being held in London at the moment. We're going to speak to Rory Challens, who's at the protest. Tell us about the number of people who've turned out and the atmosphere there.
Well, the numbers are building here outside the BBC's headquarters in the centre of London. I think the expectation is that perhaps 10 to 20,000 people might come down to take part in this demonstration. I reckon at the moment there are maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people, but the numbers are certainly swelling all the time. The plan is to move from here outside the BBC down through central London into Westminster and to Downing Street, where the demonstration will culminate. I'm going to step aside. You can get a bit of a sense of things here. Now, this demonstration has been organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, the Friends of Al-Aqsa, Stop the War Coalition, the Muslim Association of Britain, the Palestinian Forum in Britain, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Now, I'd say that earlier on this morning that the front of the BBC's building was covered in red paint. No claim of responsibility for that at the moment, but plenty of demonstrators here, plenty of anger and upset, I think, about what's happening in the Middle East at the moment.
Rory, we've been hearing some stories from around the world. In some circumstances, fairly rarely, that there has been a degree of tension between Muslim and Jewish communities, particularly in parts of the world. What is the situation in the UK at the moment?
Well, yeah, isolated incidents at the moment. I think the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has been very keen to reassure the Jewish community that the police are going to be taking any instances of anti-Semitism very seriously indeed. Indeed, she has instructed the police to basically make sure that there is no glorification of Hamas at events like this. Hamas is prescribed as a terrorist organisation under British law. Now, there are certain kind of grey areas surrounding what constitutes belonging to or even supporting Hamas. Now, Suella Braverman has said to the police that even the waving of Palestinian flags or the chanting of things like "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," whether those can constitute as a racially aggravated Section 5 offence. Well, I have to say, being down here for a few minutes, I've heard both that chant, "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and, as you can see behind me, plenty of Palestinian flags, but the police are not taking any action against those at the moment.
Rory, thanks very much indeed. That's Rory Challenge talking to us from London Air at those protests. Now, as we've been saying, the total blockade and the ongoing bombing of Gaza has created all sorts of problems, particularly, of course, of the humanitarian nature. Aid is desperately needed. Dr. Margaret Harris is a spokesperson for the World Health Organization. She's joining us by Skype from Geneva. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I'm just reading your press release here saying that there's a plane with 78 cubic meters of health supplies from the logistics hub in Dubai has landed in Egypt. They're going to be delivered to Gaza to meet the critical health needs. The problem is, of course, getting that aid across the border and into Gaza. How confident can you be that it's going to do that?
Thank you for asking that question, Rob. This is the critical question. It must happen. We've got hospitals with no supplies, overwhelmed, thousands of people that can't get treated, kids with burns who there's no pain relief for. It's absolutely critical. Now, we've got on the Egyptian side agreement that we can go through. Dr. Tedros, our Director General, met with President Al-Sisi a few days ago and got that agreement. The other side is not open yet. It must be opened.
I'm just looking at the number of supplies that you've got here. Enough trauma medicines and health supplies to treat 1,200 wounded patients, 1,500 patients suffering from heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes and so on, all of which is absolutely crucial, one would imagine. But clearly, the amount is comparatively small compared to what is actually needed in Gaza. What is the next step in terms of building up the supplies that people in Gaza are going to need?
Well, we've got a really effective hub in Dubai with much, much, much more there. But of course, if you just load plane load after plane load and have it sitting on the ground, it becomes less effective. You need to streamline it. The critical thing now is to get that moving, get it into the hospitals where it's needed. You know, this is only 20 k's away from the border. It can be done so quickly. But the will to open that border is the thing that's missing.
And I can imagine that, as you say, has a significant impact on the logistics of just being able to bring some of the, shall we say, more perishable medicines in. If the aid doesn't get in and the border remains closed, what do you think is going to happen?
Every minute, and it's happening right now, people are dying needlessly. A lot of them, again, as I said, are children. Every minute those supplies aren't getting in, more and more people die, and they die from things that would not normally kill you. Even as you mentioned, diabetes. If you've run out of insulin, you're going to die. If you don't have your heart medicine, you're going to die. If you're a woman giving birth and you hemorrhage and there's no IV fluids, there's no means, no apparatus, nothing to help you, you're going to die. So all these things, these normal things that are going on along with all the injuries, but without the normal medical supplies, means that many, many more people will die.
I can only imagine that being in a position to be able to supply this kind of help and yet not be able to get it through that 20-kilometre distance just to get it across the border must be very frustrating.
It's so frustrating. And I'm feeling frustration here in the safety and comfort of Geneva. Just imagine what it's like to be a healthcare worker, a doctor or a nurse, facing thousands of people in desperate need, knowing you could normally help them so well. That's your job. That's what you signed up for. But lacking the tools and having to turn people away. I don't know how I could possibly recover from being in that situation.
Dr. Margaret Harris from the World Health Organization, thank you very much indeed.
It's a pleasure.
Israeli forces have arrested at least 30 Palestinians across the occupied West Bank overnight. Israel accuses them of being members of Hamas. Exchanges of gunfire between Israeli forces and gunmen were reported during the arrest of a former Palestinian prisoner in the Jenin refugee camp. That followed a day of bloodshed in the West Bank. At least 16 Palestinians were killed on Friday, taking the death toll to 53 in the last 7 days. Nida Ibrahim's following developments in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank.
Well, according to the Palestinian sources, the number of those who were arrested since the morning has risen to 34 Palestinians after Israeli forces raided different areas here in the occupied West Bank. They've raided Jenin in the north of the occupied West Bank, a place that is known for having some groups of Palestinians who carry arms. And indeed, we've heard of armed clashes and confrontations that took place between the Palestinian fighters there and the Israeli forces. Now, we can confirm that the Israeli soldiers have left Jenin. Also, we've heard of confrontations taking place in Nablus in the north of the occupied West Bank, where we believe the 2 leaders of Hamas were arrested as a result of those raids. In addition to all of that, another raid targeted the Aqb al-Jabr refugee camp near Jericho in the West Bank, leading to the killing of 1 Palestinian after armed confrontations with some Palestinian fighters over there. We all in all are talking about a tense situation for the families of those Palestinians that Israel arrests. On average, we're talking about 20 Palestinians, but now since the beginning of the current escalation, the numbers are only increasing. According to the Palestinian Prisoners Society, they talk about around 400 Palestinians who have been arrested. And now, as we are seeing the current war being waged on the besieged Gaza Strip and some sort of incitement against Palestinians, Palestinian families would tell you that they can only wonder about the future of their sons that are residing now in Israeli jails. We're hearing about them not being allowed to have water for a long time, not being allowed to have electricity. So it's hard to even confirm the status of those Palestinians now inside Israeli jails. So there is a lot of fear here amongst Palestinians and a lot of worry.
A funeral has been held for a Reuters journalist killed in Israeli shelling in southern Lebanon. 6 other journalists from Aljazeera and AFP were wounded when their car was hit near the border with Israel. The Israeli army says it's investigating the incident. OK, let's briefly turn our attention to some of the day's other news. In Australia, a constitutional referendum proposing formal recognition of Indigenous people has been rejected. The so-called Voice to Parliament would have created an Indigenous Advisory Committee for the country's federal legislature. The proposals were backed by Australia's governing Labour Party. The opposition Liberal Party backed the no vote, saying the changes would be racially divisive. claimed victory in a general election. It has a comfortable lead over governing Labour, with more than 70% of votes counted. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has conceded defeat to opposition leader Christopher Luxon. Now, Nick Clark's going to be here in about half an hour, but here are pictures from the past 24 hours of human toll of the Gaza conflict. Some of them might be upsetting. I'm Rob Matheson. Stay with Al Jazeera.